Good afternoon. This is morning here around 5:45, but I know that's afternoon there. Great to be back. Today, with an introduction, I want to start that the connection between yoga and memory is not really new. It actually dates back to pre-ancient Indian time. Like the first description of it in the written is in the first textbook of yoga called Yoga Sutra, and written in 400 BC, none other than by sage Patanjali. And as you know, Samadhi is the last step of yoga. There are 8 steps, and there are 6 different kinds of Samadhi based on the memory. Like Sabitarka Samadhi, Nirvitarka Samadhi, Sabichara, Nirvichara, Sabikalpa, Nirvikalpa, Sampragyata, Asampragyata. So these are all based on the memory, because memory colors our experience. And that's kind of my basic research. These are all translational research based on the neurobiology of memory and how that colors a person's psychopathology, and how we can adapt these ancient techniques in a very self-help format and combine them with the evidence-based, rich methodology of cognitive behavioral therapy, and basically in some way transform the person, the patient, to his or her own therapist. That's basically the nutshell of all these models I am developing. So today we are going to discuss the member AM model and its utility in addictive disorder, which include chemical addiction and behavioral addiction. This will be pretty dense because these are all translational, combining different modalities. So people need a background. So I'll be happy if you want to stop me in the middle, or we can have some time for discussion with questions. So I have a couple of grants and a couple of books, but I don't get any dime from any of the grants for my salary, so there is no conflict of interest. Our current study is actually on the ketamine and the timber. Timber is a basically transnational mindfulness-based CBT for refractory PTSD. And this is one of the psychotherapy which has a biomarker of response. So our manuscripts are actually pressed now about how timber is changing not only the clinically trauma memory and their expression in PTSD, but also how it correlates, its response correlates with a memory modifying molecule in the blood and the spinal fluid. And that's basically funded by the NIH and Brain and Behavior Research Foundation. The member model, which is basically an acronym, is called MEMBER. It's a memory evoked mindfulness-based extinction and reconsolidation addiction module. So this is the specific module for drug addiction, and I hear in the previous speaker talking about addiction and chronic pain. We have a model for chronic pain that's called member PM. So member is same, instead of the AM in the pain module, it's PM. So these are all based on the memory mechanism and their modification using translational mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So Buddha doesn't need any introduction, same as Patanjali. So Buddha is like, 6th century BC, Patanjali is 4th century BC, and the person who really translated all this into English is none other than Swami Vivekananda, and he's the modern yogi and the first monk to come to the Western world. So these are huge inspiration for me. And Buddha's most of the oral teaching from the oral tradition by Buddha is translated in Pali language in a book called Visuddhimagga. That's the encyclopedia of meditation and primary source textbook on meditation. And Patanjali's version is Yoga Sutra, 400 BC. And Vivekananda actually translated that into English called Raja Yoga. So these are the primary source textbook I primarily base all my research into, in addition to the neurobiology and CBT aspect. So today we are going to talk based on these 4 objectives. One is you will be able to know what pathogenic role memory has in addictive disorder. So just to clarify, learning and memory are not exactly same. So learning is the process by which we acquire new information, whereas memory is the output, the byproduct of that. So as you know, in addiction, there are various learning theory like conditioning, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and how that make the person capture those experiences and consolidate them into a database called memory. So this is the basic mechanism. Second is how to modify the memory, and these are all pretty recent actually. Like year 2001 went to Dr. Eric Kandel, the psychiatrist from Columbia University in New York, who got the Nobel Prize for memory, long-term potentiation. His research spurred a tons of research into how to modify memory, because before that we knew memory as an abstract kind of thing. But when he demonstrated in the snail mollusk that it can be really coded and can be anatomically or physiologically demonstrated, then people become very interested into how to modify the memory so that the experience itself can change. And these are some of the things already outlined in ancient textbook on yoga or meditation like Visuddhimagga, that how memory creates the experience and how through samadhi, through shading the memory, how we can experience things directly so that memory doesn't color our current experience. So this has huge relevance with addiction, because addiction is lately, with modern technology, being increasingly studied as a disorder of memory and experience, how that colors and how that brings the relapse state even after abstinence. So the two mechanisms will be memory extinction and memory reconsolidation. My approach is actually combining memory extinction and memory reconsolidation. So for addiction, if you see, if we in some way cultivate or consolidate the calming memory, like healthy memory, and we can extinguish the difficult memory, like trauma memory or drug-related memory, then the therapy itself will be extremely powerful compared to using only one method, like, for example, prolonged exposure therapy or Q exposure therapy or familiar. Those are based on only extinction. There is no concept of reconsolidation there. And extinction has its own problem depending upon in what context you use, how much duration you use. So combining both of them will be much more beneficial, and that's what I'm going to emphasize today. Then you will be able to summarize the steps involved in this translational model, member-AM, and hopefully it's kind of difficult without training. We usually take around 3 to 4 sessions training face-to-face. I train therapist or psychiatrist here in US, in my office or in various conferences. So I'm happy to come to New Hampshire someday to train you. But that's kind of a goal I have put there, that you'll be able to apply some of these. So the outline will be what is member-AM psychotherapy and what are its scope and utility. And then learning, memory, and addiction, what's the interaction and how that initiates and perpetuates the addiction experience and make it so difficult to go away, as we discussed in a couple of cases you presented just before me. And then what are the methods to modify the expression of memory, basically extinction, reconsolidation, and combined method. Then the methods involved in the member-AM. And we have some case series, not really randomized control trial, which we are hoping to do very soon after I am done with the PTSD and the chronic pain trials. So we'll be using only case series, and there will be a huge need for doing randomized control trial in multidisciplinary setting. Now people from UK are actually interested into my research, so we are hoping to collaborate, and you guys are already collaborating. And in the final slide will be summaries and some references. So as I say, member-AM is a acronym. It's memory evoked mindfulness-based extinction and reconsolidation addiction module. And it is a modification of the Timber psychotherapy for PTSD. Timber essentially changes the expression of trauma memory, and member targets the addiction memories. And these are all done not through any toxic chemicals, done through really mindfulness-based cognitive therapy in standardized way. People have actually done research on reconsolidation of memory using chemicals. For example, one chemical is called anisomycin. It's basically protein synthesis inhibitor. It's toxic. That's why these have been hugely translated into human research. These are mostly in guinea pigs and rats. But my method is basically taking a step towards how meditation can be used to reconsolidate the calming memory and extinguish the addiction memory. So it has a huge implication in many populations, including pregnant lady with addiction, teenager with addiction, medically contraindicated medication, and also in combination with medication for various stages of addiction. So this is the Timber model, and I already discussed a little bit about the biomarker. I'm not going to say a lot because once the manuscript comes, I'm going to send to Dr. Pat, and then he can share with you. This is the book on the why yoga and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. I already explained in the last webinar I gave why I'm combining all this together, all 8 steps, because it will tremendously increase the scope and the utility of these interventions when we're using both physical aspects and mental aspect and the lifestyle, meditative lifestyle together. I call this as a trilogy, that yoga should be really not done as a physical exercise or as a mental exercise. It's a way of life, like we know. So once we use it in a standardized way as a way of life, and also in a symptom-specific or disorder-specific way, then we can really tremendously increase its utility. And that's what all my models on YMBCT about. Like there are now 8 models actually, which technically cover all of the DSM-5 or ICD-10 psychiatric disorder. There is an individual module for each cluster you can name. Like we recently published a book last month actually. It's actually the mindfulness model for schizophrenia. It's a whole book on brief intervention for psychosis, but chapter 5 of that book actually describes how this can be used for refractory auditory hallucination, refractory delusion. So coming back to the topic itself, so what are the role of memory in addiction? When I was a resident with Dr. Prabhat back in PGI Chandigarh, we all knew that we didn't really think of memory as a mechanism for addiction and its maintenance. We all focused on tolerance, craving, withdrawal symptom leading to loss of control as the central tenets. But the caveat is, if you see, the relapse can happen even after many years of abstinence. Person is abstinent. I have actually patients who are abstinent for many years, then suddenly getting relapse. Why that is happening if it is a disorder of tolerance, craving, or withdrawal? Because those things are stored in the database of memory. And depending upon what the trigger is, depending upon how much memory is buried or changed, depending on the context and the surrounding and the cues, it will be reactivated. So far we have focused on really treating the tip of the iceberg. We have not really changed the experience from the core. So that's what Member AM is about. The new insight on this is basically how pleasure and the pain memories are coded and how they are paired in the hippocampal and the amygdala as central tegmental reward pathway and stored through long-term potentiation as memory mechanism, and how they can be changed using a psychotherapy as well as medication. Hopefully we'll have a good medication to combine for combo therapy. One particular medication which I am studying is called ketamine, which you may know. So ketamine is very exciting, and we are now, this is our 4th year working with the National Institute of Health and the Center for Metabolomics. These are really very big people, and I'm fortunate to have been associated with them. Using in depression as a rapid treatment, using PTSD as a rapid treatment. I am actually, after this talk, I'm going to treat my patient. There is a patient already enrolled with refractory addiction, refractory trauma and chronic pain. We are actually going to do the treatment for that person with ketamine. But the bottom line here is ketamine being an NMDA antagonist, which is basically the NMDA receptor is responsible for the long-term potentiation LTP of memory. So this can potentially target the memory mechanism, and will be our next goal to do a randomized control trial of member AM alone, member AM with placebo, and member AM with ketamine. So that's kind of the future. Coming to how the paired association learning cues through the conditioning mechanism, you all know this. So chemical addiction as opposed to behavioral addiction, one particular thing in this is in chemical addiction, you get a reward pathway, more stimulation through dopamine. In behavioral addiction, that reward pathway is a little bit less because chemical is inherently able to excite, whereas behavior does that through memory mechanism. So these are the differences. That's why there have been a lot of controversy, as you know, in DSM-5, whether we should put them as impulse control disorder or addictive disorder. We have so many addiction now, like people are even calling internet addiction, pica is called addiction, gambling addiction, alcohol addiction. So chemical, behavioral, all these are basically similar, but there are subtle differences. And the basic mechanism is really conditioning. And when the conditioned stimulus is paired and it generates a conditioned response, so this creates a memory mechanism which pairs. This pairing is actually through protein synthesis, that conditioned stimulus create a particular protein, and that protein is really stored in amygdala and hippocampal system, and it actually triggers the expression of that protein when we are exposed. And these are all studied in animal models, and really huge data last 10 years on this. So these are the basics. And then, as I say, amygdala or cerebellum, these are all kind of implicated in various learning mechanism, and specifically for addiction, the reward pathway is a key. The thing about amygdala is amygdala totally can bypass the cortex. That means a lot of time actually the people with addiction will not be thinking because it is bypassing their conscious mechanism. They will be just engaging in this. And these specific circuits are called reverberatory circuits. And these are actually basal ganglia system is hugely implicated, like with one stimulus, with one hit, how that person is doing this again and again and again through the reverberatory circuit. So these are some of the neurobiological aspects. Then extinction and reconsolidation are the two basic mechanisms to modify the memory. So here I'll spend a little bit time because this is fundamental. So extinction means we are basically severing the connection between the conditioned stimulus and conditioned response. And this is another mechanism where a new protein is synthesized and it blocks the existing protein, which was the memory trace between the conditioned stimulus and conditioned response. If you're kind of want to know a little more, there are a lot of books. So I'll leave that in the reference section. And then you can read a little more. But extinction is basically burying or suppressing that memory, but it is going to re-emerge again. That's why when we are doing the cue exposure therapy for addiction, after a certain amount of time, that protein is going to be degraded and new context will arise and person will have relapse. So that's the reason scientists become very interested into reconsolidation mechanism, because extinction has these demerits or drawback. So you have to do it again and again, and there is time dependent, context dependent. So because of the demerit, reconsolidation mechanism was studied, and reconsolidation compared to extinction basically creates a new memory. It's a change memory. It's no longer the same memory buried deep inside your hippocampal or cortical amygdala system. It's a new memory, and so that's why it has a lot more advantage over extinction. And extinction also, particularly from the PT study in the prolonged exposure therapy, you see like so much secondary or re-traumatization in the therapeutic setting because we are exposing them more long. And depending upon the context, the person actually can have worsening of the symptom. So those are the reason reconsolidation mechanism is kind of more in research now. But I personally believe in both, and my approach is really kind of combining controlled extinction with promoting reconsolidation. Extinction is for the pathological, like like the drug-related memory, and the reconsolidation is for the calming memory after their arousal with the Q exposure, so that we can change the memory database and their expression. So we will not really focus more on this because we already spoke. This is a very good book on memory reconsolidation. I know the author. She is from NYU, New York University. And this has a compilation of all the reconsolidation research all over the world done over the last 10 years. 2013, this was released. So my specific work is actually, as I spoke, like the thing in blue are actually my work. So I use the mindfulness method for control extinction and reconsolidation. And how to do that is I have a particular module called STOP module. It's an acronym. I'll cover the detail in another slide. For reconsolidating the calming memory after the initial arousal through the Q exposure. And then MB-GATE is the extinction protocol, is basically mindfulness-based graded exposure therapy. So you all are familiar from your MD training or therapy training about graded exposure therapy. But MB-GATE is basically how the graded exposure, in graded exposure, basically we expose the person, but don't give any tool. The person has to go through that arousal. But in MB-GATE, we actually teach them the mindfulness-based method to apprise the arousal experience in a detached way using a particular inventory idea. And in that way, the person is actually much more comfortable. So in our studies and our collaborator, we are now actually doing like some multicentric studies. So these are actually much more user-friendly compared to prolonged exposure or graded exposure therapy. Then when we are, so these are all psychological therapy. Then when you talk about combining them with pharmacotherapy, as I say, my work has been on ketamine, propranolol, and clonidine. And before, in PGI Chandigarh, I used the sodium amytal, the truth serum for the dissociative personality and some PTSD symptom. So these all can be combined in various proportions and in various sequence to really improve the addiction experience or trauma experience or chronic pain experience. These are all different protocols, just modified based on the context of the patient and the diagnosis. So why the yoga and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy model? I already discussed the Timber for PTSD, Member AM for addiction, for the drug memory, Member PM for chronic pain. So the main methods in all these three are controlled arousal, not really prolonged arousal, not really uncontrolled arousal. Controlled arousal using a standardized cue and for a amount of time, and then inducing the detachment from that arousal experience, where the person will practice all 7 limbs of yoga from step 1 to step 7 and just able to observe happening in the body and mind in a detached way. And that detached reappraisal, actually, we have evidence to show that calm down the amygdala and the autonomic arousal system and make the prefrontal cortex more active to really think through, rather than impulsively into drug or flashback or elaborating on the chronic pain experience and storing those memories much more. So basically, it's a meditation-induced detachment protocol combined with control arousal and establishing a daily home practice, initially with therapist-assisted method in 3 to 4 sessions or 2 to 3 sessions, then daily home practice. And within around 2 to 3 weeks, we have seen clinical changes. And the biomarker changes, particularly about the fear memory, like the PTSD, we are able to see that actually in 24 hours. 24-hour blood level of that pre and post this intervention is hugely different and clinically and statistically significant. These are all PTSD data I'm showing. As I say, for the member M, we don't have any biomarker data, but that is the direction to go. We have clinical data in a case series. So the foundation of all is basically yoga as a profound psychosomatic science, not just a physical exercise. And meditation is a science of attention and how attention can be cultivated in a stable way so that the person will be able to watch all the experiences during the arousal process in a very calm and detached way. More calmer, more detached means amygdala is more cool and not firing that much. Memory will not be stored that much. So, for example, if you are very surprised to meet a person, you will be remembering that person forever. But if you are very calm during the meeting, not necessarily you will have that amount of memory stored. That's why we all remember very pleasure experience too long or very painful experience too long. And then next one is basically all the cornerstones of intervention, like how the stable attention can be cultivated by standardized meditation protocol. And these are all described in my book and various articles I publish, and also available for training to healthcare provider. Then how to induce detachment of the by using the attention and the 5-factor model of any experience. So this is a very key intervention, the 5-factor model, which I translated from original mindfulness methods. So any experience is a component of 5 things, which we are going to describe later. That include the addiction experience, and how all the 5 components of addiction experience can be appraised in a detached way, and how data can be generated on all 5 components using the 5-factor inventory, and how subsequently cognitive behavioral therapy can be applied to change each component. So you change each component and the big elephant, which is the drug experience, changes. So this is kind of component to gestalt model. Like you change the component and the whole experience will change. And then the middle way lifestyle is basically the meditative lifestyle, described eloquently in many books, including a book by His Holiness Dalai Lama. This is the book, and this provides the matrix for generalization of all the meditative experience people have gained, and how the whole life is a meditation and whole life is an observation. Nothing get unnoticed, nothing get out of control. But so this is kind of a matrix, and I have actually standardized this for various age group. Like my youngest practicing the middle way is around 6-year-old, and the oldest is 80. So it has been hugely standardized, and this is kind of my bulk of work. Took many years to standardize the middle way lifestyle, which is very abstract, to a concrete day-to-day living. And this is my favorite slide, and this is my daughter, who is now 7. She is meditating in near Puri, near Jagannath temple. She was only 3.5 at that time, and this is the child's model of meditation. And I just love this slide because my daughter has been an inspiration for me, how this can be used for children. Me being a child psychiatrist, I just feel blessed to have a child's mind, and she gives a lot of feedback on my presentation. She actually attends a couple of my presentation in national level here as a child, and give feedback how I speak, how I can be better. So coming to the point is, this picture is model of mind, meditator, and meditation. So mind is like this big ocean you see. And this mind has 5 components, like the thoughts, feelings, perceptions, which include all the perception, like 5 dimensions, like tactile, auditory, gustatory, all 5. And then craving, impulse, and then memories, all 5 components. And meditator is really not the mind. Meditator is actually detached from the mind and just watching how these 5 components are building the experience, including the addiction experience. And the technique of meditation is basically all 8 steps. So this is all described in my books and various publications. And when you are really using module for addiction experience, we are using the STOP module, which I'm going to describe in details very soon. And then how detached reappraisal can change the memory content because they are not emotional about it. And then how all these 5 factors can be basically elaborated using the 5-factor inventory, and specific cognitive behavioral therapy can be done to change each of the 5 components. So these are all 8 limbs. No need to talk to Indian audience about this. They all know about it. So this is the meditation. I just wanted to focus here. So meditation is a 3-step process, and meditation is the 6th and 7th limbs of yoga, as you see here. So the first phase of the practice is actually stilling the body. Means body need to be totally still, not movement. So in addiction, those movement you see, like people are tapping their feet, they are fidgeting, they are blinking their eyes. Those are because of the unconscious memory, mostly from the basal ganglia and cerebellar system. Each addiction during withdrawal state or during craving state or during relapse state, if you see, they will have a lot of bodily movement, particularly cocaine. If you see cocaine, they have a lot of tics. So these are basically stored in the unconscious part of the brain, not really accessible to the prefrontal cortex. But remember, these are really the storehouse for the relapse. So when you are inducing detaching to do is to still the body. And that is done from step 1 to step 4 of the 8 limbs. Then step 5 is really preparing to enter into the realm of mind. And then step 6 and 7 is essentially stilling the mind using the 5-factor module. And 5-factor module will come. And then step 8 is basically the samadhi state is essentially detached reappraisal. And then how to reappraise and recode the memory in a calmer way, and then generate data and do subsequent cognitive behavioral therapy to change the data. That's so in a nutshell is the whole module. So these are the 5-factor model, and these are much more powerful than CBT because CBT has only 3 things. They have only thoughts and behavior and feeling. CBT really doesn't talk about memory. Memory is really a big thing in any experience. If you ask me who am I am basically who am I right now plus all my memory about myself from Chandigarh, from Odisha, from US. If by some magic you erase my memory, then I'm just like a baby. I'm just all the time in the present moment. And all my experience, whatever I'm experiencing now, is really colored by the memory. So that includes the addiction experience. So by harping the memory, we can definitely do a lot of therapeutic work. And these are missed in the traditional therapy model. And that's where kind of my work fits to increase the scope and utility of existing treatment modules. So basically, I adapt and kind of renovate the existing module to bridge the gap between neurology, psychiatry, and spirituality. So these are all about. Then member M rationale is basically why I already explained that the pathogenesis of addiction is actually memory and condition learning through prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, amygdala, and the reward circuit in the brain. And by combining extinction and reconsolidation in a user-friendly way without any side effect in a self-help manner can really do wonders. So that's, and then the middle way lifestyle. And basics in the member M is both reconsolidation and extinction. So the stop module, which is a shorter version, 5-minute protocol, is the reconsolidation of calming experience after the arousal is established. And the extinction is essentially mindfulness-based graded exposure therapy to expose the patients with addiction to various cues. And then once arousal is established in the middle, not really extremely aroused. If you make them extremely aroused, the addiction memory is going to be more consolidated. It will actually create a lot more problem. So you want to do a control arousal, and I have a specific scale for that. So once we do control arousal, then person make the memory database labile. The memory data is no longer like untouchable. It become labile because of the arousal. It's like when you hit the iron become more malleable. Not the cold iron. Cold iron is so solid, so rigid, you cannot do anything. But once you hit it, you can bend it. So it's the same principle that to make them control aroused so that memory database become labile and you can do intervention to change the memory database. And this is the 5-factor inventory. This is primarily my major bulk of work to generate individual thoughts, individual feelings, perceptions, memories, and individual urges, craving, impulses, all in response to the cue. And these are also, you can generate a number, quantify also. These are qualitative as well as quantitative. And when you ask the person with addiction to meditate, essentially, they cannot really meditate. They cannot really focus on the breath because the thoughts will come, the feelings will come. The thoughts will be specifically about, depending upon what state of addiction, it will come about craving, or it will about what they did, or what about that needle, what kind of memory. So they cannot really focus. So this becomes the bulk work to establish a stable state of attention so that they're able to handle this distraction and become detached. And also make the body and mind still using the 5-factor module. And once detachment is established, then they generate data about the individual content of the 5, like individual feelings, what chain of feelings impact into person's life, and then CBT is applied. So STOP module, MBGate, and these are all kind of how we are doing it. So I have a particular scale called assessment scale for mindfulness intervention, ASME, and that has 7 dimensions, and it generates a mindfulness profile so that you can personalize the member AM psychotherapy for the individual person. Because I will not believe that same method, same sequence will work for me, whatever work for another person with addiction, because they have 2 different minds. So you have to make the intervention very personalized. So ASME scale essentially does that, about in what sequence you want to introduce the method by generating a database. And the ART-MR scale, I was telling, like it actually prevent extra arousal, because ART-MR highest score is 55, and these can be done in outpatient office. Although I have neurobiological data, because I have a lab here where I arouse and I see all the responses of people, of the autonomic system. Before I was involved in fMRI study of brain during the arousal process. So ART-MR essentially can be used in outpatient office like I do now, or it can be used in lab. And this is a behavioral scale actually, which make you prevent extreme states. So you prevent over consolidation of the memory. So you do in the middle, like out of 55, you stimulate until like 25 to 30 points, and then induce the STOP module to make them total calm. And when this is done in therapist-assisted way for 2 to 3 seconds, person is totally ready to practice at home. And then at home, we generate a graded exposure list, and we do the control extinction protocol. So this is a summary slide. As I say, strike the iron when it is hot. That means when the memory is labile, then you can change it. If the person is not aroused, just talking calmly, that memory is not going to change. Because arousal essentially activates the amygdala system, and amygdala system basically make the memory database more labile. So this is the whole protocol, and I can send the slides to Dr. Prabhat, or maybe I think you are recording. If anybody needs the slides, let me know. And then these are the main methods. As I say, the highlight is how to induce detached mental state, which is not reactive to individual thoughts or feelings or the content of the mind during the arousal experience, and how to establish alertness and relaxation at the same time. That's the hallmark of the meditative mental state, that you are alert, means you are not really anxious, and you are relaxed, means you are not really sleepy. So relax at the same time, that's the mental state you want to achieve. And this can be studied neurobiologically, fMRI, or any measure you just named, but that's the key. This is the STOP module. As I say, it is an acronym. So S for stress or craving, any kind of stress in the body they detect. Then T is basically the 3 standardized mindfulness breath, no movement. And then I train actually into this, like what breathing is particularly necessary, and how breathing is the entry point, and how they can cultivate a state of alertness and relaxation at the same time using the STOP module. So STOPP. S is stress, then you stop. Then T is 3 mindfulness breath in standardized way. O is observe the 5 component of that stress experience. In member AM, this is the addiction craving experience. So craving experience is broken down into individual thoughts it gets, the feelings it arouses in us, or the sensation, the urges, the movement, the memory specifically it arouses, and then how we can induce the detachment with the practice. And then last P is basically whatever stress made you destabilized from the day-to-day action you are doing, how to go back to that action and finish it. So the whole thing is actually sounds lengthy, but I actually train patients. They're able to do it in the moment of need within 1 minute, and through regular basically in the height of arousal, they're able to recultivate the calming memory, and that's the reconsolidation protocol, where the memory is essentially building the calmness. And the extinction protocol is basically extinguishing the arousing memory. That's a different method called mind-based graded exposure therapy. And these are the graded exposure. In drug situation, for example, like craving or anxiety or withdrawal, you can actually generate the list, like you build a pyramid from 10 to 100% subjective unit of distress, and tackle the 10% first. And in the 10%, you break it down to imaginative exposure and do the stop module. And you do imaginative exposure and then do stop module. After 2-3 exposures like this, you will not be aroused at all. Then you are ready for the real life exposure. Then you are ready for your patient to see that needle of heroin, to see that shop with written script, which are basically the cues. So these are the detail how to do. This is a standardized home practice log, and you can even use that for your clinic. So all these slides, you can use it, you can print it, you can practice, you can train patients using these tools. And then this is the symptom specific scheme that initially we do the preparatory session. This is called the stage 0 of the training. In stage 1, we generate a QX, the mild withdrawal, mild arousal state, and then we use the stop module here. Then these are all therapist assisted through beginning. Then we establish the home practice. So these are all the scheme of application of the MEMOR-M module. It usually take around 8 to 10 sessions, depending on the severity of addiction. Within 12 sessions, you should be able to achieve demonstrable clinical remission. And then when you use medication, like this is the slide, actually one of my favorite. So Dr. Wenner here, actually, he published an article in Nature last month. He's my partner for the last 4 years in NIH. And he's actually a leading expert in the world for ketamine. He's the person who brought the ketamine metabolites, how they work. And our understanding about ketamine has drastically changed in the last 2 years or so. Like, we initially knew it is just an NMDA antagonist. Now, Dr. Wenner's publication last month was actually how ketamine metabolite, there are actually 7 to 8 metabolites, and how they work in the different part of the glutamate system, NMDA, AMPA receptor or kinase receptor, and dopamine. So these are really complex and evolving. I published 3 papers actually just on this, like what's actually ketamine, what it does actually, because there was a lot of taboos and mystery around this. So ketamine is the perfect chemical, and it has been actually interestingly, if you see here, like the data 2013 and Milton 2010, they have already used ketamine for cocaine craving and for some opiate addiction. So MEMOR-M and ketamine will be like a direction to go for us in the future based on our already existing data in trauma memory and based on the rationale for ketamine altering the memory. So this is the...
Firstly, sir, thank you so much. It was a really, really nice presentation.